The price of betrayal. Dennis always believed he knew his wife, Marina. Her smile was his guiding light, her voice the melody that made life bearable. They had been married for 7 years, and not once did he doubt her loyalty. But one night, coming home earlier than expected, he found her in bed with another man, his best friend Oleg. Rage burned through him like wildfire. He didn't scream. He didn't run. He just stood there, watching as his entire world collapsed. Oleg stammered, trying to explain. Marina reached out, crying, begging him to listen. But there was nothing left to say. The next morning, Dennis didn't show up for work. He ignored all calls. Marina wept, pleaded for a conversation, but he was gone. 2 days later, the police found her body. The apartment was locked from the inside, and on the table lay a note. Just one sentence: "You took everything from me. Now, you get nothing." Oleg was found later, inside his car, throat slit open. As for Dennis, he was never found. Some say he killed himself. Others say he simply disappeared into the shadows, waiting. The price of betrayal. Part 2. Months passed, but Dennis remained a ghost. No trace of him, no body found. The police called it a murder-suicide case gone cold. The world moved on, but not everyone forgot. One evening, Oleg's younger brother, Victor, received a letter. No return address, just a single page inside. The handwriting was unmistakable Dennis's. "You think it's over, but I'm not done." Victor felt his blood run cold. He remembered Dennis as a quiet man, someone who never raised his voice. But grief changes people. Pain reshapes them into monsters. Weeks later, Victor's nightmares turned into reality. One by one, those closest to Oleg started vanishing. His old friends, his colleagues, each disappearing without a trace. The police had no answers, only whispers in the dark. And then, one night, Victor came home to find his living room in shambles. Broken furniture, shattered glass. On the wall, smeared in something dark and red, were 3 words: "I see you." He turned, heart hammering, and in the dim light of the hallway, he saw him. Dennis. Or at least, what was left of him. His face was hollow, eyes sunken, a specter of the man he once was. "You took my life," Dennis whispered. "Now, I take yours." The next morning, the police arrived at Victor's house. The scene was brutal. Blood everywhere. No sign of Dennis. No sign at all. The price of betrayal. Part 3. The massacre at Victor's house left the police rattled. No forced entry. No signs of struggle, only blood. His body was never found. The whispers of Dennis's return spread like wildfire. Some said he was a ghost, hunting those connected to Oleg's betrayal. Others believed he was just a man who had embraced the darkness. Then, another letter arrived. This time, addressed to Detective Antonov, the man assigned to the case. No return address. Just 5 chilling words: "You can't stop the inevitable." Antonov wasn't superstitious, but something about this case disturbed him. Every victim had a connection to Oleg. Every scene was drenched in vengeance. He knew the pattern, and he knew who was next. Elena, Oleg's widow. Antonov reached her house minutes before midnight. The place was eerily silent. He knocked. No answer. He drew his gun and pushed the door open. The air was thick with the scent of iron. Then he saw her. Elena sat in the middle of the living room, her eyes wide open in terror. Her throat was slit ear to ear. And behind her, on the wall, was another message. "Almost done." Antonov felt the hairs on his neck rise. He wasn't just chasing a killer. He was hunting something relentless. Something that wouldn't stop until Justice Dennis's version of it was complete. But there was one problem. Oleg had a son. A 12-year-old boy. And Dennis never left loose ends. The price of betrayal. Part 4. Detective Antonov barely slept that night. The realization hit him like a freight train. Dennis wouldn't stop until every trace of Oleg's legacy was erased, including Oleg's son, Alexei. By sunrise, Antonov was already at the boys' school. He scanned the playground, his stomach twisting in knots. Alexei sat alone on a bench, kicking at the dirt, unaware of the nightmare closing in on him. Antonov approached cautiously. "Alexei." The boy looked up, wary. "Who are you?" "I'm a detective. I need to take you somewhere safe." Alexei hesitated. "Why?" Antonov opened his mouth to explain, then he felt it. That creeping sensation. Like being watched. His grip tightened on his holster as he scanned the area. Parents picking up their kids, teachers chatting, but something was off. Then, in the distance, past the school gates, he saw him. Dennis, standing perfectly still, his hollow eyes locked onto Alexei. Antonov grabbed the boy's hand. "We need to go now." Dennis took a step forward. Antonov pulled Alexei toward the car, shoving him inside. He turned back, gun raised, but Dennis was gone. Like a phantom in broad daylight, Antonov floored the gas pedal, his hands shaking. He needed to hide Alexei somewhere Dennis couldn't reach. But as he sped down the road, a thought gnawed at him. Dennis had been a ghost for months. Always one step ahead. Always watching. So how did he know Alexei would be at school today? Unless... Antonov's blood ran cold. He looked at Alexei through the rearview mirror. The boy was staring back at him. And he was smiling. The Price of Betrayal, Part 5. Antonov's grip tightened on the wheel. His heart pounded in his chest. "Alexei," he said slowly, keeping his voice steady. "What's so funny?" The boy kept smiling. "Nothing, detective." Antonov's instincts screamed at him. Something wasn't right. He took a sharp turn down an empty side street, tires screeching. He needed to get somewhere safe now. Then Alexei spoke again, his voice eerily calm. "You don't get it, do you?" Antonov's skin prickled. He glanced at the rearview mirror. The boy's expression had changed. The innocent, scared child was gone. Now, there was something else. Something darker. "You think you're saving me," Alexei continued. "But I don't need saving." Antonov's knuckles turned white on the wheel. "What the hell are you talking about?" The boy chuckled. The exact same chuckle Antonov had heard on crime scene recordings, the voice of Dennis. "I was never his son," Alexei whispered. "I was always his punishment." Antonov slammed the brakes. The car skidded to a stop in the middle of the deserted road. His breath came fast. He turned around, gun half raised. Alexei sat there, calm, watching. Then, he leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "He's already here." A shadow moved outside the car. Antonov barely had time to react before the glass shattered. Then darkness. The Price of Betrayal, Part 6. Pain. That was the first thing Antonov felt as he drifted back into consciousness. His head pounded, his vision blurred. The cold bite of metal dug into his wrists, handcuffs. He was tied to a chair. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of rust and damp concrete. A basement. Then, footsteps. Antonov's body tensed. A figure emerged from the shadows. Dennis. But he wasn't alone. Alexei stood beside him, his young face eerily blank. His eyes took hold, to knowing for a child. Dennis crouched down, leveling his hollow gaze at Antonov. "You've been busy, detective." Antonov gritted his teeth. "Killing a child, Dennis. That's what you've become." Dennis smirked. "You still don't understand." He placed a hand on Alexei's shoulder. "He's not a victim. He's the reason I'm here." Antonov's pulse pounded. "What are you talking about?" Dennis leaned in, his voice barely a whisper. "Oleg wasn't just a traitor. He was a monster. He didn't just take my wife, he created this." Antonov's breath caught. "Created? What?" Alexei finally spoke, his voice smooth, deliberate. "Oleg never loved me. He made me, molded me. I was his little project." His lips curled into something that resembled a smile. "He taught me how to break things. People. Minds." Antonov's stomach twisted. He had heard rumors about Oleg's past. The disappearances. The untraceable crimes. But no proof. Until now. Dennis stood up. "I didn't just kill for revenge. I killed to erase his sickness. To wipe it from this world." Alexei turned to Dennis, tilting his head like a curious animal. "And now what?" Dennis looked at Antonov. The silence stretched. Then Dennis handed Alexei a knife. "Now, we finish it." Antonov struggled against the cuffs, his pulse hammering. "Dennis, don't do this. He's just a kid." Alexei's grin widened as he stepped forward. He pressed the cold blade against Antonov's throat and whispered, "Who said I was a kid?" Then the lights went out. The Price of Betrayal, Part 7. Darkness swallowed the room. Antonov's pulse pounded in his ears. He struggled against the cuffs, the metal biting into his skin. "Think. Stay calm. Find a way out." A faint shuffle of feet. The whisper of fabric. Then, Alexei's voice soft, almost playful. "You're afraid, aren't you, detective?" Antonov didn't answer. He focused on the sounds, trying to pinpoint their location. Then a flash of movement. Cold steel pressed against his throat. Not deep enough to cut, just a warning. You don't have to do this, Antonov said carefully. Dennis, this isn't justice. This is murder. Silence. Then Dennis's voice, low and hollow. Justice. Where was justice when Oleg grew in my life? Where was justice when he turned this boy into... He stopped, exhaling shakily. A small chuckle from Alexei. Into what, Dennis? Antonov's gut twisted. The way the kid spoke, not like a child, but like something else. Something wrong. Into something you can't control, Antonov said. The blade at his throat twitched. Just for a second. Then, a loud crash. The basement door burst open. Flashlights. Shouts. Gunfire. SWAT. Dennis cursed. Antonov barely had time to react before a hand yanked him backward, the knife slicing across his shoulder instead of his throat. Pain. Warm blood. Gunshots. Dennis fired into the dark, but the tactical team was too fast. Shadows moved in, bodies dropped. Then silence. A flashlight beam hit Dennis. He was on his knees, a gun clutched in his hands. Blood soaked his shirt. Alexei was nowhere to be seen. Antonov, breathless, struggled against the cuffs. An officer rushed over, freeing him. We got him, the man said. It's over. Antonov looked at Dennis. The man was shaking, his gaze unfocused. Then, slowly, he smiled. You think this is over? His voice was barely a whisper. You never understood, detective. I wasn't the monster. Antonov's stomach dropped. Where's the boy? He demanded. The officers looked at each other. One of them cursed under his breath. Alexei was gone. And on the wall, smeared in Antonov's blood, were two words, see you? The price of betrayal. Final act. Days passed. Then weeks. Alexei had vanished without a trace. No cameras caught him. No witnesses saw him. It was as if he had never existed. But Antonov knew better. He barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that smile, that knowing gaze, that promise. Then, one night, it happened. A call came in. A mass killing in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Antonov arrived at the scene, gripping his gun so tightly his fingers ached. The smell hit him first. Blood. Bodies lay strewn across the concrete floor. Gangsters, criminals, men who had once worked for... Their throats were slit with surgical precision. And in the center of it all, Dennis. Alive. Barely. He was slumped against the wall, a knife buried in his gut. His breathing was shallow, his hands slick with his own blood. But he was smiling. Antonov rushed forward, kneeling beside him. What the hell happened? Dennis coughed, blood trickling from his lips. He's perfect, he rasped. Everything Oleg wanted. But better. Antonov's skin crawled. Where is he? Dennis chuckled weakly. You still don't get it, do you? He gripped Antonov's wrist, his nails digging in. He was never running. He was waiting. A whisper behind him. Antonov turned to late. Pain. A blade sliced deep across his ribs. He staggered, gasping, his gun clattering to the ground. And there he was. Alexei, drenched in blood. Calm, smiling. I was wondering when you'd get here, the boy said, wiping the knife on his sleeve. Dennis wanted to see you one last time. Antonov gritted his teeth, pressing a hand to his wound. Why? Alexei knelt beside Dennis, tilting his head. Because he wanted to believe he still had control. That he could change fate. Dennis wheezed a laugh. Did I? Alexei leaned in, whispering something in Dennis's ear. Whatever it was, it made the dying man's smile fade. His eyes widened. Then, Alexei slammed the knife through Dennis's heart. A single gasp. A shudder. Then silence. Antonov forced himself to move. He reached for his backup gun, his vision swimming. Alexei turned, watching him struggle. You've been chasing a ghost, detective, he said. Dennis thought he was hunting me. But he never understood. He stepped closer. Antonov tried to lift his weapon, but his strength was failing. I wasn't his prey, Alexei whispered. His fingers brushed the gun in Antonov's hand and gently pushed it away. I was his evolution. Then, in a blink, he was gone. By the time backup arrived, the warehouse was empty. Only corpses remained. And Antonov. He sat there, bleeding, shaking, staring at the words carved into Dennis's chest. See you soon. And he knew this wasn't over.